Hello. Hello, everybody. Hello. Woo! So, I have promised the panelists that we are going to have fun in this session. And that's the promise that I hope I will be able to live up to and hope that all of you will have fun in this session as well. And thank you so much, Mr. MC, for the introduction. To give you guys a little bit of background, I'm Kelvin, the director at the Malaysia Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It is a center that we established in collaboration with the World Economic Forum. And we are the first center here in Southeast Asia. And the center is a multi-stakeholder platform where we work very closely with experts from the World Economic Forum in driving and accelerating our digital transformation ambition and also energy transition goals as well. And just to share with you a little bit about AI governance and like what I think the Secretary General and also Sam and also Mr. Adrian has shared this morning, that the Malaysia Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution will be a strategic partner with the National AI Office in driving the different partnerships, international partnerships and collaboration through the World Economic Forum network as well. And one of the key areas that the center is actively working on is in the area of AI governance. And the previous panel has done a brilliant job in setting the ground and laying the ground on the opportunities of AI adoption in Malaysia. And if you can see in your goodie bag, you will see two publications. One publication is on the economic impact of Gen AI adoption here in Malaysia. It was a paper that we published last year in collaboration with Microsoft. And very excited to share that we have also published the paper on the future of Malaysia AI governance. You can, it is in your goodie bag. If not, you can check out the booth, the Ministry of Digital's booth, where you can download the soft copy as well. And as the previous panel has discussed a lot about the opportunities of AI adoption here in Malaysia, we see the tremendous impact on how AI is able to increase different productivity gain, increase the efficiency of the different sectors as well, and also the potential to be able to transform the different sectors of the economy as well. But looking at the other side of the coin, AI has its limitation and it has its risks. And we do see in around us, in our backyard, where you see AI-generated deepfakes that is used in promotion of investment schemes. We have seen a few public figures where their images are actually generated with AI in promoting some investment schemes. And not only here in Malaysia, but in the region as well, in Singapore, in Indonesia, where different deepfakes are used in political campaigns, in other situation as well. And that begs the question on how do we balance the promotion of innovation of artificial intelligence, but in the same time, keep building the right guardrails that will not impede innovation. So I'm really glad that today we have very esteemed panel of panelists joining us in this conversation. Firstly, we have Ms. Farlina Said, who is the team lead and also fellow at of Cyber and Technology Policy Program at ISIS Malaysia. I always have to emphasize this, the good ISIS, the Institute for Strategic and International Studies in Malaysia, a think tank with the Prime Minister's office. And we also have Ms. Adilah Junid, who is the Director for Legal and Government Affairs for Malaysia and Philippines at Microsoft. And of course, the man that needs no introduction at all, Mr. Sam Majid, the head of NIO Malaysia. And I think for today's panel session, the present day of AI governance, we just recently published the AI Governance and Ethics Framework back in September. And actually, in fact, all of us are actually on the working committee in developing that framework. And also Ms. Karla from the World Economic Forum has also helped. Karla, we have Karla. Do we have Karla here? Yes, we have Karla. And also Miss Karla here, ladies and gentlemen, who is dialing in from San Francisco. Thanks so much, Karla, for dialing in. I know it's midnight in San Francisco. And Miss Karla, she's She's the lead for data policy and AI at the World Economic Forum, that's based in San Francisco. And all of us, including Karla, who has actually reviewed our national AI governance and ethics framework. And I think particularly for us, we work very closely with the experts in World Economic Forum to, one, looking into the different global benchmarks and comparing it against our national standards. And one of the key areas that we look into in AI governance is the importance of having a multi-stakeholder approach in developing the AI governance and ethics framework. And the Malaysia Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, in collaboration with ISIS Malaysia and also Microsoft, hosted a workshop where we gathered over 40 different stakeholders from government agencies, from corporates, from civil societies, in understanding AI governance from 3 different lenses, looking into the existing legislative structure of Malaysia in AI governance. Secondly, looking into the ecosystem in Malaysia in supporting the delivery of AI governance. And finally, looking into the institution here in Malaysia. And today we'll be very keen and also very excited to dissect the paper. And I'd like to invite Farlina. So, as one of the key authors of the paper, what were some of the key insights or takeaway that you have observed from the conversation that we had through the workshop and also in the recent development, but also from your whole process in writing that paper?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kelvin. And it really is an honor for me to actually be a part of this panel, to also actually be the author of the paper that would not come to be if it was not for my digital, if it was not actually also for Microsoft, but also the participants in the workshop who were actually key in lending a lot of their thoughts and insights. When we actually did take a look at the AI governance infrastructure or architecture, I think that's a better word, AI architectures that we had during the time when we're thinking about AI governance. If it's all right, I will actually just call to see whether, okay, so I will probably just walk through a bit of the process when we are actually looking at the AI governance when we were actually constructing the AI governance paper. And the first thing is that the methodology is actually meant to be participant led, and it's actually quite transparent. So we had like a voting process as well, as we actually broke people off into groups, namely on institutions, large mechanisms, and ecosystems. So during the sessions, we actually just asked every participant only 3 questions. The first is, how would you actually visualize what is the ideal governance mechanism for your institutions? What is the ideal governance mechanism for your legal mechanisms? And what is your ideal situation when you are actually taking a look at ecosystems? And these are the challenges that actually received the highest votes, which were in terms of the interpretation of AI safety in local contexts. Then there was also concerns about clarity around accountability mechanisms. They were also concerned about fragmentation in communication and synergy, as well as issues when we look at data. And as we've actually heard in a lot of the panels today, data will be core, and it's actually one of the crucial areas when you're actually driving an AI economy or AI adoption, or if you're looking at ensuring that AI is adopted safely. So the second part would actually go to the second part. I have a clicker. So the second part is, as we actually received a lot of response, and if you were to scan, I apologize, there was actually a QR code in the corner earlier for you to actually scan the paper. Let me actually just reverse it a bit so that if anybody actually has not scanned it, to actually be able to scan it at the bottom there. It would, after we've actually received a lot of the feedback, which is actually attached as the appendix, we actually asked ourselves, what is actually normal when we do take a look at AI trends? What are the other countries doing? And if we're actually attempting to find our own pathway when we address risk governance, what could be the best practices? So that was where the first thing that we actually did draw, the first message that we received from the workshop is that Malaysia should actually not pursue hard regulations in haste. This is because a lot of the questions were about coordination, and it was actually about communication. And that's where we actually understood from the participants at the workshop that cultivating Malaysia's AI potential is as important as mitigating the risks. So when we were looking at what was normal for other countries, for instance, like China, Japan, or Canada, or UK, there was actually a trajectory, and some of the history started in policies introduced in 2016 or 2017, when they were actually building their own domestic industries, when they were actually talking about like incorporating AI into the types of manufacturing of homeware appliances, for instance. And this is actually perhaps what you actually see if you were to shop in Shopee or Lazada and you were to find a smart microwave or a smart I don't know, like something then that's actually related to certain policies that were actually placed in the past, like a smart vacuum cleaner or something like that. So when you're actually thinking, what they've actually done as in terms of trajectory is that you actually look at building your domestic AI industries. You look at linking R&D and knowledge pools. And this means either linking your universities, linking your experts in a way that they could actually exchange ideas with each other. And I think in some aspects, a lot of our understanding of AI regulation or governance we would actually immediately steer towards hard law. And then when we were actually taking a look at the trajectory, it did come from the age of we've termed it the age of regulations that actually just began with GDPR in 2018. There's actually this fixation towards privacy and towards and it actually continued towards other applications and technologies, which looks into the types of AI principles introduced also post 2018. So you actually got things like AI, UNESCO recommendations on ethics and artificial intelligence, for instance, as well as different countries actually pursuing their own ideas on where ethics could be when you're actually developing this technology that's obviously taking the world in a certain wave. And then I think the last thing that we actually took a look at is in terms of risk mitigation, because we do understand as the technology is actually deployed, when you look at certain laws, for instance, like the EU AI Act, it actually approaches it from a very specific risk-based framework. And as such, the sub-question when we actually did construct the workshop was a question on hard law and soft law, and which could be the best pathway if we're actually attempting to govern, whether it is actually governing for cultivation of AI, or actually we're actually thinking about mitigating certain risks as it's deployed. And that was actually where in parts of the paper you will actually find that we actually talk about soft law, hard law, principle-focused ways of developing regulations, or are we actually looking at sectoral approaches of managing this or governing these aspects as how it's actually being practiced in cybersecurity today in Malaysia. So essentially, I think, back to the question that you asked, what were the key insights and what was the takeaways that we could actually draw from this process? And I think the first is that everybody agrees that there is a captain that needs to steer the ship. The captain, and there has to actually be a coordinating body who could actually communicate with multiple stakeholders, who could actually drive policy efforts, inclusive of a stock-taking exercise. The body should actually also determine national goals, if it's actually possible, either in consultation with various stakeholders or find a way to actually sort through goals that actually have to be mentioned. And lastly, find the best modality to introduce guardrails, because we do understand it is actually quite sensitive, especially when we conducted the workshop that actually consisted of private sector, government agencies, people from, even if you're from government, you're of different jurisdictions. How could you actually introduce regulations and guardrails that could ensure your technology is deployed with a lot of safety? And that's where the modality is almost as important as the type of regulations that you wish to introduce. The second thing is that there will be legal gaps, and I think some parts of today we actually heard about intellectual property, for instance, and one part of the legal gaps is on the laws that actually probably either require strengthening or actually require a newer, more innovative approach to address it. The second part is actually the transparency, explainability, and even accountability mechanisms that actually needs to be in place. So these are, we've just termed it legal gaps, but it's not only like the word or the letter of law, it's actually in terms of the enforcement as well. The third is that there has to be a refined approach to AI safety. So some there were parts of the paper that actually spoke of AI safety institutes. And AI safety institutes is a very interesting idea. It's a sandbox to safeguards kind of effort in different countries. For instance, in Japan, you would actually have R&D approaches that actually also refers to different guidelines like the NIST framework, and they would actually find these different types of efforts, and they would actually attempt to introduce, they will attempt to address issues with AI, for instance, disinformation, as Kelvin mentioned, while UK actually has AI Safety Institute that takes a look at looking at, I think, founding models, if I'm not mistaken, and they would actually attempt to actually list that so that they would attempt to also research founding models so that they can actually introduce the best policies. So in AI Safety Institute, in a glance, actually perhaps seem like what we actually take as a cert today, which is perhaps where one of the trajectories could be if we are looking at AI Safety Institute networks in the future. And the last is actually on data governance, which I think everybody has agreed that you need safe data, you need data that actually upholds privacy, but you need the data. I think that's the first part. You actually need the data. So how do you actually go about this? And I think one of the ideas that was promoted was an ethical and innovative data governance center, which I think we can actually just discuss that further.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Farlina. I think you chose that photo by intentionally, is it? So I think what you've pointed out was really interesting. I think looking into the different modality in how we can look into governing AI. I think we have a spectrum that we are able to reference to. I think from the EU AI Act, which introduces a very hard law, and you have the NIST framework in the US, which is very market driven, and then you have the sectoral-based kind of approach and something that is more voluntary, for example, like the ones that we are having here in Malaysia. I would like to turn the attention to Karla. So Karla sits in San Francisco, and Karla, I think from your perspective and in your experience, what are some of the key considerations for Malaysia when we want to draw learnings from the different international best practices, in particularly, looking like what was previously mentioned on the EU AI Act to the NIST framework, but how can we then tailor those approaches to the Malaysia local socioeconomic context?
First of all, I wanted to say thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be part of this panel. And yeah, answering to your question, I think I'm going to build on a lot of what Farlina shared and that is included in the white paper. First of all, it is important to understand that even though there's like many different regulatory frameworks, different approaches, they're not mutually exclusive, right? So countries can adapt some of these, whether it's the risk-based ones, the rules-based ones, the principles-based or the outcomes-based, and they can adapt it based on their needs, based on their risk profile, based on the balance that they want to achieve between promoting innovation, but also safeguarding and ensuring responsible AI development. So even though we have different frameworks, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. It is important to adapt this to the specific socioeconomic landscape, but also understanding the local technological capacities, economic priorities, national development plans, the state of infrastructure, the state of data that is essential, the state of talent in the country. So those are some of the dimensions that countries should definitely look at. Another aspect that was mentioned earlier by Farlina, it relates to understanding existing regulations, because what we are seeing is that Gen AI is exacerbating some of the challenges and sometimes some of the gaps that exist in current regulations, such as regulations on data privacy, data protection, intellectual property. So it's important to identify where the gaps are, and also where like we don't need maybe a new regulation, but we need more like the clarification of responsibility and allocation of roles, whether it's on the legal authority or on the model designer, the model provider, but like really identify where like the responsibility allocation should fall in. Another aspect is also evaluating existing regulatory authorities and what's the capacity, what's the level of enforcement that they have, and understand also like where there are trade-offs between having maybe a centralized authority versus a specific dedicated agency, because we've seen many examples around the world, and so it's important to maybe understand how these aspects play specifically for the Malaysian context. Other aspects to consider also is what are the impact on local workforce for, as we know, all the potential and a lot of things that we're already seeing in terms of disruptions brought by Gen AI. And also like how can we promote collaboration with academia and society to promote research and development to ensure data flows and also to develop a capacity, infrastructure, and compute power.
Thank you so much for that, Karla. I think one point that you brought up that was really interesting is looking into, assessing the current infrastructure, current landscape, and current ecosystem. If a centralized agency or if a decentralized one would work. But and I think that's where the National AI Office plays that role in becoming that centralized, I would say, agency in overseeing these issues and also overseeing the ecosystem as well. I'm turning my attention to Sam. Hi, Sam. So, Sam, I think today has been a really exciting day, and there are different developments in the AI governance space in Malaysia. We've launched the National AI Governance Guideline in September, and we are also seeing different agencies developing sectoral guidelines as well. For example, like in your previous experience for the telco industry, and we have also seen for the public sector as well. So from your view and your vantage point, do you see, what's the direction that you see Malaysia is heading in the AI governance development, and what are some of the vision and some of the foresight that you have for this, for the development in this area?
Thank you, Kelvin, and pleasure to be here again, second time today. I hope you're not bored with me. I actually had fun participating in Farlina's workshop because I was there. Yeah, and I could see that in the process of coming up with that particular publication, which I actually enjoy reading. So thank you, Farlina. It was fun to kind of see how all our discussions distill down to some recommendations and lay of the land. So going to Kelvin's question, when I was participating, I was coming from MCMC side, communication and multimedia, and we saw that 5G in particular, which was designed for machines, it was never designed for humans. So the DNA of 5G always has AI inside it. So as we roll out 5G capability, the question of who is governing this AI piece within the 5G infrastructure, nobody could answer that. Even MCMC couldn't answer that at that time. So I saw that under each government jurisdiction, communication jurisdiction or transportation jurisdiction, they work only within that jurisdiction. So therefore, at that time, 2 years ago or something like that, there was the obvious need that because 5G was going really fast, there was a need to kind of put some clarity on how safe can AI be when it comes to the licensees, not the consumers. The license holders, when they deploy AI equipment, AI telcos, and how do we safeguard them and how do we safeguard their end users. So we came out with an AI code of ethics, which I think should be finalized pretty soon by MCMC. So that angle basically allowed me to see that there is a need for a centralized, because otherwise each sector will do their own if they actually do something. Some sectors may not even do anything. They just wait and see and until things come crumbling down. So there was a need for, at least I saw there was a need at that time, a centralized way of doing things, maybe not to over-enforce, not to impose on everybody, but in a way to kind of lead others that are a little bit more lagging on how do we come up with some code of ethics or guidelines. And I akin this whole thing to, I suppose, when all of us were back in school and we just finished school and we wanted to take our driver's license. And you know that your mom and dad wouldn't allow you to drive your car if you didn't have your driver's license. And that license is a ticket that shows that you have understood the rules and regulation and the safety aspects of driving a car. So it's similarly, I feel that AI is something similar. In each industry, or perhaps individuals or industries need to have some sort of a driver's license to kind of show that you understand, you set some tests, you sat down for some tests, you understood a few rules and regulations. Therefore, if you participate, you are a safe member of this ecosystem that's supposed to be safe. So, and I'm glad that we have C4IR in the picture, because it means that when we set up something of a centralized governance of AI, if we have one, it means that we're not doing it in silo. We are connecting the via C4IR as a bridge. We're connecting to other more progressive landscapes, which have probably done 5 years earlier. We get to learn from them, and we don't reinvent the wheel, but we also lay up on what else can Malaysia do, so that then we are not doing this in isolation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Sam, you brought up a really good point. I think that, for us that, we can't do this in isolation, and it's not something, I think, as much as we want to build our domestic capability, but we also need to also harmonize with our neighbors and also with our global counterparts as well. And I think also considering what will be the ecosystem around it that will need to support that goal. And Microsoft plays a very important role in building that ecosystem. From the announcement this morning, from the talent front, the infrastructure front. But I'm curious to know, at the organization level, so I know that Microsoft has the responsible AI guideline within the organization, laying out the accountability structure, the governance structure in Microsoft itself, from all the way down to the product developer. Can you share with us, what are some of the, how is Microsoft approaching AI governance within its organization? How do you balance innovation with ethical and societal implication of deploying AI here in Malaysia? And what do you think are some of the lessons that you think Malaysia will be able to take on?
Thank you, Calvin. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for still being here and for having me as part of this really great, esteemed panel. I do want to just also call out congratulations again on the launch of the National AI Office, because if you were to look at the point where we started with coordination and communication between the different streams that were looking at AI, which was identified during the workshop, to the point where we actually have a coordination body that's 6 months perhaps.
Yep.
So yeah, I hope some people can take heart that calling back to the Prime Minister's message earlier this morning, the speed of execution, the acceleration, the paradigm shift, it's happening. So with that, thanks, Calvin, for the question. And yeah, I'd love to share a little bit of how Microsoft's journey has been from the point where we first formulated responsible AI principles, which was in 2018, which you'll see very heavily aligned with the National AI Ethics and Governance Guideline, which also you'll find are very aligned with internationally emerging recognized principles for responsible AI. So that started in 2018, and along the way, as we started improving our AI capabilities, we also improved the governance and responsible AI implementation along the way. So some of the building blocks that we have, and there is really a huge sort of like matrix of institutional infrastructure that we have, as well as tools and processes and governance systems that we have to help us along the way. The principles represent the broad guidelines. We also have a responsible AI standard, which includes the processes and tools ranging from guidance on how to do a risk assessment for a particular use, all the way to actual software toolkits that you might be able to use to assess certain things that help you determine whether or not there's bias, that kind of thing. And also institutional structures. So we do have Office of Responsible AI, for example, We have ultimate responsibility and accountability for the impact of the solutions and services that we provide lying with the executive team. And most importantly, we have embedded processes for engineering, compliance, all these different work streams within Microsoft to work together. So this goes back to, I think, what some of my fellow panelists alluded to, which is that we do have learnings from certs, for example, the world of cybersecurity, from the world of data protection, even from the world of social media. We have learnings on how to incorporate that need to have responsible use of AI and always bear in mind what will be the outcomes, keeping your main objective in mind, which is that you do want a beneficial outcome with a positive benefit to come from your use of AI. Bearing that in mind, you embed it into your systems and processes from the very start when you ideate what you might want to do. So that's really what we believe the private sector developers and deployers of AI should really be doing. That's the role of what we provide. And working together with all other stakeholders in forums like this, also to shape that dialogue, to understand what would be the best approach to ensure that those beneficial outcomes from AI can be used and can be gained while we are able to mitigate any risks.
That's really great and really great to hear. And I think a lot of key learnings that many could draw attention and also learnings from as well. I do want to point out that if you have any questions, we do have the Slido links. Just use your phone to scan that QR code. And I have another iPad here that has all the questions, and we'll get to your questions as soon as we can. And I just want to circle back on one of the points that Adilah has actually brought out, with the different frameworks, and I think also the different committee, even down to the engineering team as well. And that works very well in the context, I think, for a large organization. And I think many of the conversation, even not only nationally, but even in ASEAN level as well, has been about, yes, you have the ASEAN Guide for AI Governance and Ethics, which is really great, which gives a frame and sets a really good bedrock for many organizations to be able to look into AI governance for their organization. But then comes the operationalization of it. Sam, so in the white paper, one of the key point of discussion is, for the importance for Malaysia to set a vision for AI development and also operationalization in it. How do you think that, what do you think are NIO's role in that front? And what do you think, how can NIO be that catalyst in the Malaysian ecosystem for increased operationalization of AIGE within organizations and also the adoption of AI?
Yeah, so I see NIO as playing the role of incorporating trust in the ecosystem. So to me, trust is very important, especially for something that's new, where you have a lot of doubts, you're not sure whether this is safe, and who provides that comfort level that this will not eat you up or has some other undesired consequences. So the trust model, which ultimately has many other subsets within it, needs to be built up, and NIO can't do it in isolation, because trust comes from a lot of elements, like, for example, practitioners knowing the limits of certain technology, understanding the demand and supply. And this is where the word national of NIO plays a part, where we should pull in all the relevant players that are of various life cycle of AI, whether you are on the model side or you are on the data side or on the ethics side, and put more understanding on what are the limits, what are the best practices, code of ethics, for example, impact of AI, positive and negative, if one can see that far. And such input, in my opinion, does not just come from government people. It needs to also come from practitioners that have access to the same use cases, perhaps done elsewhere. Microsoft and other multinationals have use cases done all over the world, where it can be used or can be incorporated in working groups. So to me, doing work in isolation in this really fast-moving space is a waste of time. It needs to be, bringing people in,
Yep.
and that database of or shall I say the registry of practitioners and experts needs to be set up so that we know who to pull in for input, for guidance, and that should then come out with a regular, not just once a year kind of thing, but regular shout out. It could be messaging, it could be something that easy for people to digest, so that we can build the trust and environment over time. So it's not just one big document at the end and here you go, read and come back if you don't understand.
Yep.
I feel that it should be continuous communication.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think continuous engagement, communication, I think trust building and international collaboration will be key in this. And I think that's where the World Economic Forum has formed the Global AI Governance Alliance, where My Digital Corporation and through the C4IR, we represent Malaysian government in that international forum, where it is a platform that gathers different key leaders globally, from government, from corporations, to champion the responsible development and usage of AI. And I think Karla is very involved in that work stream in the World Economic Forum. And Karla, my question is, how can countries, especially countries from the global south here in Malaysia, and especially countries who are still in very early stages of their AI development journey, to be able to bridge the gap in AI adoption? And how can countries who are very early on in the journey start thinking about future-proofing themselves on the emerging opportunities and risks of AI, and to foster better collaboration, like what Sam has mentioned, in bringing in some of the use cases and lessons learned from the other markets or similar markets into Malaysia?
Thank you so much for the question, Calvin. And yeah, at the forum, we're very proud that we have the AI Governance Alliance that now has over 600 members from all sectors, from all over the world, together to really advance responsible AI development, deployment, and regulation. And as part of the work that we've been doing in the AI Governance Alliance, I lead the work that we do on responsible AI governance and regulation. And more recently, we launched a new work stream that focuses on inclusive AI, and we'll be publishing a blueprint for policymakers around the world during our annual meeting in Davos. And we basically want to address what are some of the priorities that countries should look at to promote inclusive AI, and how can global South countries can join this revolution and join this, but in a responsible way. And I would say that as part of our research and consultations with many stakeholders through interviews, workshops and such, we have identified that there are 3 key objectives that could be prioritized. And of course, this could be adapted depending on the specific stage of the journey, depending on the specific resources and priority set on the national AI strategy and national plan. But we think that they cover some of the key priorities that countries in the global south should focus on. The first one, building sustainable AI infrastructure. Second one, ensuring diverse and high quality data sets, and also establishing guardrails for ethics, safety, and security. And underlining these 3 dimensions, the three objectives, we have the importance of advancing multi-sector international collaboration, as some of the panelists also highlighted, because this definitely can help take advantage of economies of scale, take advantage of knowledge sharing, resource sharing. And I can talk a little bit more about these 3 priorities that I was mentioning. When it comes to building sustainable AI infrastructure, it's important to identify responsible and sustainable sources of energy that can power data centers, that can power systems. It's important to also secure the networks and build resilient AI supply chains. We know that national critical infrastructure and enterprises have to be protected against cyber attacks. So this is why it's important that cybersecurity firms, both government, infrastructure providers, collaborate to develop robust AI infrastructure and associated regulatory guardrails. And another aspect is guaranteeing access to high-speed connectivity. and also promoting digital public infrastructure initiatives to ensure that there are open standards and secure and interoperable data systems that can promote the access of digital services for businesses, but also for the population. Another important aspect to build and strengthen the infrastructure relates to the widespread access of AI-ready devices that can work under maybe limited compute capability or weak internet connectivity, but that can help people access AI services.
Yep. Talk
On
about.
the
Yep.
second dimension,
Sorry.
oh, sorry.
Go on. Yep.
Very quickly, on the second dimension that I was mentioning on data, it is important to make data available and accessible. Also to make it, to ensure that data sets are diverse and inclusive. We know that there's a lot of models that have been trained on Western bias data sets. So it's important to promote national data to ensure that the models really reflect the context and the cultural nuances that we have in the countries. It's also important to promote data ownership and sharing and regulate how this is managed in the country. And also, of course, promote ensuring that data privacy is protected, especially with the proliferation of deepfakes and misinformation and disinformation. And finally, on this, the third dimension that I was mentioning on the establishment of guardrails for ethics, safety, and security. Again, this is a dimension where international cooperation and multi-stakeholder collaboration is essential. First, because it's important to advance and set ethical guardrails that can promote trust and they can ensure that AI systems work well, but also align with local values. Identify and define responsible use guardrails. And in this sense, it's important that government and private sector work together.
Yep.
And sometimes self-governance mechanisms can help companies and from all sizes to identify how they can have more accountability and how they can promote and develop the technology more responsibly. But there has to be some degree of intervention from the government, especially to ensure consistency in the implementation and the monitoring and the reporting of these through these mechanisms, because a lot of times we've seen that these responsible use guardrails or mechanisms can be voluntary. And finally, on safety and security standards, we know that AI poses a lot of risks, some of them known, but a lot of them that are still emerging. So it's important that researchers and private sector and government work together to identify like typologies and guidelines that have like different type of risk, especially for high risk technologies, such as autonomous weapons and mass surveillance systems.
Yeah, I think Karla, you brought up a lot of the points, really good points on some of the prevailing risks for AI, and I think it's a really good time to segue into our Q&A, because one of the questions that we have is, there have been cybersecurity, cyberbullying cases, especially with a girl who committed suicide because of AI-generated pornography. And the question is, will our existing law here in Malaysia be able to prevent such thing from happening in the AI world again? If anyone would like to take on that question.
I think it's a very large question because we do have to bear in mind that the online safety bill was actually just passed yesterday. And to be honest, I've actually not gone through the exact letter of the bill to actually understand the extent of it, because I think there were like certain gaps when it comes to cyberbullying that was actually quite difficult for you to actually even pin down responsibilities and how you could actually build a case that cyberbullying actually occurred. So I think that was actually one of the issues that happened when we're actually looking at the law without it being deepfake or pornography-generated images. Then that goes to the second part, which we're actually looking at deepfake laws and then the type of mechanisms that you actually do have to put into place. I believe there was an update, if I'm not mistaken, to one of the laws regarding deepfake. But I probably actually have to look at the exact letter of the law to understand the extent of it. Yeah, so that would actually be my response currently.
No problem. Any other comments or feedback? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to maybe have add to help people have a framework of thinking about this.
Yep.
So a lot of things that will be harms will be a combination of factors that lead to the harm, right? So we won't necessarily be able to always specifically legislate for a specific combination of factors. So just in something like cyberbullying harms, there's so many aspects, right? There's already certain criminal legislation, there's legislation on the use of the technology or the network that delivers that bullying platform. There's legislation on sort of like harassment, that sort of framework for controlling that sort of activity exists. Layered on top of that, now there is new technology that perhaps exacerbates how that kind of activity can happen.
Yep.
So just, I think one of the frameworks that we do have to bear in mind when we're looking at how to tackle this is those vertical segments of legislation and regulation that already exist, and how can that be supplemented with gaps, as well as the need to strengthen the resilience of Malaysia to deal in a world where that is now a new type of harm.
Yep.
So your digital literacy, your media literacy, your understanding of how to read labeling systems, perhaps if that's something that happens on platforms.
Yep.
So just wanted to add that to the mix. Thank you.
Maybe I just add one more with respect to if you put yourself in the shoes of the police that needs to deal with this kind of situation, and whether do they have the relevant provisions coming from, especially when the cyber harm comes from an AI type element. Would the police have enough skills to enforce it, to understand how to deal with it, to prosecute it to some way, or hand it over to the prosecution, and all that elements where it also means that a lot more elements of not control, knowledge that needs to be built into this ecosystem, especially when AI can also be very deceiving in terms of you think that it came from a human being generating those content, but it could actually be just an autonomous thing. For example, it did on its own. Who knows?
Yeah.
So yeah, but for me, I put myself in the shoes of the enforcement people as well, and how do they have to deal with this?
Got it. So the second question that we have is, how do you see Malaysia's AI governance structure evolve in alignment to the different international efforts in AI governance development, for example, like the ASEAN framework, and also with different geopolitical uncertainties as well? Anybody would like to pick up on that question?
What I would say is that I think these are the exact same issues that we were looking at when we had the roundtable, and it's the same exact issues that Malaysia is facing in sort of any other aspect. We live in a world where we do have to interact and engage, and even more so for technology such as AI. You can't really confine the technology to the borders of one country. It consists of a whole stack ranging from the land that your data centers are on, to the chips, all the way to the models and the applications, and that whole value chain cuts across the borders. So what I would say is we would have to look at how we approach the governance of AI in a very strategic way, bearing in mind what we would like to achieve as a nation, and keeping an eye on global developments. And this is why I have so much respect for Mr. Sam, who will be at the forefront of helping us do that.
Yes. Very important role.
Yeah, and maybe if I can add, in that particular scenario where AI, if you break it down, it could have the compute sitting in one country, the model in another country, and the data coming from another country. And the jurisdiction that needs to happen to kind of like, to kind of follow where things are, and the governance and perhaps the best use case and the ethics that comes with it. It's very challenging. But saying that, I'm not saying that it is an impossible task, but it's a moving target, requires a lot of collaboration, especially intergovernment or between borders as well.
I'm happy to add 5 seconds of something to maybe make people feel some kind of optimism. A good analogy that we are looking at that we can think of is how, for example, nuclear power is governed or aviation. So the world has managed to come together on globally agree on what some of the regulations and approaches should be. So this potentially could be the way forward for AI.
I think something interesting about the second half of the question, which is on different geopolitical tensions that could actually exist in this area, it goes all the way from the semiconductors to when you actually have it as software. So when you're actually looking at the tensions that exist in this entire spectrum, it can be everything from producing the chips to when you're actually, which type of governing model that you actually follow, which I think for Malaysia can be quite an unfair question because we do have specific social, technical, and also socio-economic considerations when we decide how we actually govern our cyberspaces. But something that can be optimistic in how we've actually always govern our cyberspace, as mentioned by Adilah earlier, is that we do refer to international standards. And I think because we are always aware that a lot of our data would actually, we are quite, we are open to cross-border data flows.
Correct.
And I think in that sense, we do actually have to make sure that our technology would be able to work well with other technologies. So something to consider next year could be promising. I mean, it's like ASEAN is thinking about an AI, something, a deliverable on AI, if I understand. That's what, if the headlines are quite correct, it's on AI safety.
Correct.
So in that sense, the region is interested in doing something about it, to have safer AI in the region. And perhaps developing the standards together would be quite useful.
Absolutely. Karla, do you have any comments on that question?
Sure. No, I think that international cooperation and the collaboration with these multinational actors is essential, but at the same time, understanding like what are the national priorities. But I feel like both ASEAN and APEC have done a great job in like trying to harmonize and bring some consensus to the conversation. Like the ASEAN published the AI governance and ethics back in February, and APEC published a report on AI in economic policy making. And of course, we've seen all kinds of bilateral, multilateral agreements. The colleague was mentioning nuclear sector. There was a recent collaboration between the US, UK, and Canada on AI in the nuclear sector. And of course, international collaboration can support in many areas, like promoting interoperability, helping to set AI standards and principles, ensure that there's alignment around AI safety procedures, and of course, align the newly created AI safety institutes, but also promote knowledge sharing, capacity building, compute sharing, data sharing. So there's definitely a lot of benefits for collaboration, as long as, of course, the national priorities in the national capacity is taken into account.
Yep. Thank you so much for that. I want to close off our session with this question. It's a very interesting question. I want to read it in verbatim. So, in our AIGE, I think one of the first chapter is about the value and the principle that we will take on in developing our AIGE, which is according to our Rukun Negara and also our federal constitution. And this question is really interesting. I love it. How can we coexist with machines that inherently lacks human values? What values should we embed in AI? We are looking at Sam now.
No one to my left. Well, that's a really big question. But to me, I think to echo what PMX said this morning, it is about human.
Yep.
It is about, it's not just about machine, but it's actually, by the end of the day, it's about human. And in particular, Malaysia's value, Malaysia's humanity has a particular brand, particular value system that needs to be extracted but put into a technology kind of framework that will then be imposed onto tools like AI.
Yep.
Even the terminology of AI as a tool, in my opinion, is also a question mark, because a tool means that you have a human using it. But we are seeing more and more these days that some of the AI are autonomous. They are on their own. They are, or in some way, they are agents. They're just being used by another AI. So they are no longer just tools. They are, so, but the short of it is, I feel it's, if we focus on the humanity side along that journey and then apply to technology, especially when we know that the risk is larger, then I would say that's a start.
Got it. Got it. And I think for a lot of the conversation around AIGE fundamentally goes back to the human developing the models, looking into sourcing and segmenting and cleaning the data sets, and also the culture of innovation within the organization, and the culture for cultivating an ethical and responsible environment where the developers feel safe to be able to practice responsible practices in developing the products. And to build on the points and to summarize the points of the different panelists, fundamentally it boils down to building that culture. We can have the regulation in there to set the baseline for us. We can have the different AI governance and ethics framework to give us a guideline. But ultimately, it comes back down to practice, and practice by individuals like you and I in the different remit that we have in ensuring that we have a safe and responsible environment where we are able to adopt AI safely and responsibly. That's all the time that we have, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in thanking our panelists, Farlina, Adilah, Sam, and also Karla, who's dialing in all the way from San Francisco. It's midnight, it's 1 a.m. in San Francisco. Thank you so much, everybody.
All right, so thank you to the panelists and also Mr. Moderator